Chapter 1. The Golden Son. Kirk Conley had always known he was the disappointment. He learned it at 8 years old, when his father Stanford spent 3 hours at Derek's Little League game and missed Kirk's science fair one entirely. He learned it at 16, when his college fund mysteriously dried up, while Derek got a brand new BMW for his birthday. He learned it in 1,000 small cuts, the forgotten birthdays, the dismissive comments, the way his mother Eleanor would light up when Derek entered a room and barely acknowledged Kirk's presence. But he'd built a life anyway, a good one. At 32, Kirk ran a modest but successful craft brewery in Portland, Oregon. Conley's Copper and Grain wasn't making him rich, but it won awards, employed 15 people who actually liked coming to work, and earned enough to support his marriage to Sherry. Or so he'd thought. The September afternoon, when everything shattered, started ordinarily enough. Kirk was in the brewery's back office, reviewing hop supplier contracts, when his phone buzzed. His grandfather's lawyer, Emmanuel Santos. "Mr. Conley, I'm calling with difficult news. Your grandfather passed away peacefully this morning." The world tilted. Kirk's throat tightened. "Grandpa, well, I'm very sorry." He specified minimal services, cremation, no funeral. "However, there will be a will reading this Friday at 2 p.m. at my office. Your presence is required." Kirk barely heard the rest. Grandpa will had been the only family member who'd ever actually seen him. The only one who'd visited the brewery, who'd asked about his dreams, who'd told him stories about surviving the Depression by being smarter than the bastards trying to keep you down. He drove home in a fog, finding Sherry in their small house's kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She'd been distant lately, coming home late, always on her cell, less interested in the brewery talk that used to engage her. "My grandfather died," Kirk said quietly. Sherry looked up, and something flickered across her face. Not quite sympathy. Something calculating. "Oh, Kirk, I'm so sorry." She stood, gave him a perfunctory hug. "When's the funeral?" "No funeral. Will reading Friday." "Will reading?" Her voice sharpened with interest. "Well, of course I'll come with you. We're married. I should be there." Kirk nodded, but something about her enthusiasm felt wrong. Grandpa will had never liked Sherry, had once pulled Kirk aside at their wedding and said, "That girl's got hungry eyes, Kirk. And not the good kind of hungry." Kirk had defended her then. He wasn't so sure now. Friday arrived with unseasonable rain hammering Portland. Kirk dressed in his only suit, a navy one he'd bought for the wedding. Sherry wore black. Designer, something he didn't remember her owning. She'd been on her phone all morning, texting rapidly, smiling at the screen. "Who are you talking to?" Kirk asked. "Just people offering condolences," she said quickly, pocketing the phone. They drove to Emmanuel Santos's office in tense silence. The lawyer's building was downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that smelled like leather and old money. Kirk had been there once before, years ago, when Grandpa will first introduced him to Emmanuel, a careful, thorough man with kind eyes and an extremely good poker face. The conference room held Kirk's worst nightmare, his parents. Stanford Conley sat at the head of the table like he owned it, silver-haired and aristocratic in a $1,000 suit. Eleanor perched beside him, ice blonde and surgically preserved, diamonds glittering at her throat. Derek slouched in the corner, smirking at his phone, 35 years old and still living off their parents' money, working a do-nothing job at their father's commercial real estate firm. And beside Derek sat Ryan Mendez, his business partner. Tall, slick, with teeth too white and a tan too perfect. Kirk had met him twice and disliked him both times. "Kirk," Stanford said flatly. No warmth. No acknowledgement of loss. "You're late." "It's 1:58, Kirk replied evenly, cutting it close. His father's eyes drifted to Sherry, and something passed between them. A look, brief but unmistakable. Kirk's stomach dropped. Emmanuel entered before he could process it, carrying a leather portfolio. "Thank you all for coming. Let's begin." Chapter 2. The Will. Emmanuel Santos had practiced law for 30 years, and he'd learned to read a room. This room was toxic. He'd liked William Conley enormously. The old man had been sharp, principled, with a working-class background and self-made wealth that he'd never flaunted. William had updated his will 6 times in the past 5 years, each version more carefully crafted than the last. The final version, completed 3 months ago, had been unusual. "I'm going to execute Mr. William Conley's last will and testament." Emmanuel began, noting how Sherry leaned forward, how Stanford's jaw tightened with anticipation, how Kirk sat very still, grief etched into his features. Good kid, Kirk. William had loved him fiercely. Mr. Conley's estate includes his primary residence in Laurelhurst, appraised at $4.2 million, stocks and bonds worth approximately $2.8 million, and various personal effects. The total estate value is roughly $7.3 million after taxes and fees. Stanford smiled, the smile of a man who'd expected this windfall his whole life. Emmanuel continued, "To my son Stanford Conley, I leave my collection of golf clubs and my membership at Waverly Country Club, which he may maintain at his own expense." Stanford's smile faltered. "To my grandson Derek Conley, I leave my fishing equipment and my 1979 Cadillac, which hasn't run in 15 years and is currently rusting in my garage." Derek sat up straight. "What the fuck?" "Language, please," Emmanuel said mildly. "To my daughter-in-law Eleanor Conley, I leave my mother's china set, which she once called pedestrian at a family dinner I have not forgotten." Eleanor's face flushed. Emmanuel felt a professional satisfaction. William had been thorough. "The primary asset, the Laurelhurst estate, including the house and grounds. I leave to—" He paused, watching Stanford lean forward. "Sherry Lynn Conley, currently married to my grandson Kirk." The room exploded. Kirk felt like he'd been punched. "What?" Sherry's eyes went wide with shock, but not the right kind of shock. She looked at Stanford and Eleanor, who both looked equally stunned, but somehow less surprised than Kirk would have expected. "That's impossible," Stanford sputtered. "My father would never. There must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," Emmanuel said firmly. "The will is dated June 15th of this year, properly witnessed, completely legal." "But why her?" Eleanor hissed, looking at Sherry with something between fury and confusion. Kirk's mind raced. This made no sense. Grandpa Will had barely tolerated Sherry. At their last Christmas dinner, he'd asked her pointed questions about her former career in pharmaceutical sales, with an edge that suggested he knew something Kirk didn't. "And to my grandson Kirk Conley," Emmanuel continued, and Kirk's heart hammered, "I leave my personal pocket watch, which you will find in the velvet box on the credenza." The room fell silent. Kirk turned to see a small burgundy box, worn and faded. He stood on shaking legs and retrieved it, feeling everyone's eyes on him. Inside lay a tarnished silver pocket watch, its face cracked, its hands frozen at 3:47. The chain was broken. It looked like garbage. Stanford started laughing. A cruel, barking sound. "A broken watch. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. It suits you," Derek chimed in, grinning. "Something useless for someone useless. Just like him," Stanford added, his voice dripping with contempt. "My father, always so proud of coming up from nothing, working with his hands, his precious, real work. And now he gives his working-class hero grandson a piece of junk." He turned to Kirk. "That about sums up what you're worth, doesn't it?" Kirk's jaw clenched. The watch felt heavy in his palm, worthless metal and broken glass. Around the table, he could see it, Derek smirking, Eleanor's lip curling in disdain, Ryan Mendez's barely concealed amusement. And Sherry who'd just inherited $4.2 million. Sherry who was looking at the watch with something like relief. "Oh, Kirk," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm sure it has sentimental value." Chapter 3. The Sealed Envelope. Emmanuel Santos watched the family's cruelty with distaste, but he wasn't finished. "There is one more item," he said, cutting through Stanford's laughter. The room quieted. Emmanuel reached into his portfolio and withdrew a sealed envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with old-fashioned wax seal bearing William Conley's initials. This letter was included with the will, with explicit instructions. It is to be read aloud, immediately following the distribution of assets, in the presence of all parties. He looked directly at Kirk, and it is addressed to Kirk Conley only. Kirk's heart stuttered. Stanford stopped laughing. "What letter?" Eleanor demanded. "It's dated the same day as the will." Emmanuel broke the seal carefully, unfolding thick paper covered in his grandfather's distinctive handwriting, precise, old-fashioned cursive. He began to read. "My dear Kirk, if you're hearing this, I'm dead, and you're probably confused and hurting. You're holding my pocket watch, the one my father gave me when I was 18, the one that got me through the Depression, through the war, through building everything I have. They're calling it broken. They're calling you worthless. Let them. Kirk's throat tightened. Around the table, the atmosphere shifted. Emmanuel continued. That watch hasn't been broken for 20 years. I had it restored by the finest horologist in Switzerland in 2003. It's an 1891 Patek Philippe Grand Complication, one of 64 ever made. The last one sold at auction for $6.8 million. Yours is in better condition. Stanford's face went white. But Kirk, the watch itself isn't the point. Open the back case. There's a catch under the winding stem. Inside, you'll find a key. That key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box number 447. In that box is the real inheritance I left you. Stock certificates for Conley Properties transferred to your name alone, dated 5 years ago. That's the commercial real estate company your father thinks he owns. He doesn't. I do. Or rather, you do now. Controlling interest, 62%. Value, approximately $24 million. The room erupted into chaos. That's impossible. Stanford roared, lunging to his feet. Sit down, Emmanuel said sharply. I'm not finished. Kirk's hands shook, the watch suddenly burning in his palm. I did this, Kirk, because I spent 5 years watching. Watching your father gaslight you. Watching your mother's calculated coldness. Watching Derek leech off the family name while you built something real with your own hands. But more importantly, I spent the last year watching what they planned to do to you. Emmanuel's voice dropped, quiet but clear. 17 months ago, Sherry began an affair with Ryan Mendez, Derek's business partner. Yes, Kirk. I'm sorry. Your wife has been sleeping with that smiling parasite for over a year. 6 months ago, Sherry approached your parents with a proposal. Divorce you after my death. Split whatever you inherited 3 ways. Sherry, your parents, and Ryan. They agreed. Your mother helped Sherry find a lawyer. Your father suggested waiting until after the will reading for maximum financial impact. Sherry made a sound like a wounded animal. Ryan was halfway out of his chair. I found out through my own attorney, who has friends in Sherry's divorce lawyer's office. They were sloppy, arrogant, assumed an old man wouldn't notice. So I changed my will. I gave Sherry the house that's about to be foreclosed on. Stanford's face went from white to crimson. Yes, Stanford. I know about the second mortgage you secretly took on my property 6 months ago, forging my signature, planning to pay it off with inheritance money. The forensic document examiner's report is also in box 447, along with the FBI complaint I filed 2 weeks before my death. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime. 10 to 30 years. Eleanor gasped. The house Sherry just inherited has $3.8 million in debt against it and is 90 days from foreclosure. She owns a beautiful $4.2 million asset with almost no equity and massive payments she can't afford. Congratulations, dear. Sherry's face had gone gray. Kirk, the watch is yours. The company is yours. The evidence is yours. Do with it what you will. But know this, you were never the disappointment. You were always the only one who mattered. Build something beautiful, and make them pay. With love always, Grandpa. Emmanuel folded the letter. The room was silent except for ragged breathing. Kirk looked down at the pocket watch. His hands found the catch under the stem. It clicked. The back case opened, revealing perfect, gleaming mechanism, and a small brass key taped inside. When he looked up, his father was staring at him with pure hatred. Sherry was crying, her carefully applied makeup running. Derek looked like he might vomit. Ryan was already edging toward the door. Kirk stood slowly, pocketing the watch and key. When he spoke, his voice was steady, calm, cold. Sherry, I'll have divorce papers drawn up by Monday. You can keep the house, and its debt. I'm generous that way. He turned to his father. Stanford, I'll expect your resignation from Conley Properties by end of business today. Security will escort you out. To Derek, you're fired too. Obviously. He looked at Emmanuel. Thank you for executing my grandfather's wishes. I'll be in touch about the FBI complaint and the stock transfer. Then Kirk walked out of the conference room, leaving his family in ruins behind him. And for the first time in his life, he didn't look back. Chapter 4, The Safety Deposit Box. Kirk drove to First National Bank in a daze, the pocket watch heavy in his jacket. The September rain had stopped, leaving Portland's streets slick and gleaming. His phone buzzed continuously, Sherry calling, texting, his mother calling, Derek calling. He silenced it all. At the bank, a professional woman in her 50s named Mariana Haynes led him to the vault. Box 447, she said. Mr. William Conley added you as an authorized accessor 3 months ago. We've been expecting you. The box was larger than Kirk anticipated. Inside, he found stock certificates, thick and official, transferring 62% of Conley Properties LLC to Kirk Conley, dated 5 years prior and notarized by Emmanuel Santos. The company his father had built, or rather, that Grandpa Will had funded and technically owned, was his. A forensic document examiner's report, 40 pages long, detailing how Stanford Conley forged his father's signature on a $3.8 million reverse mortgage application 6 months ago, using the Laurel Hills property as collateral. The examiner's credentials were impeccable. The evidence was damning. An FBI complaint, filed but not yet acted upon, holding in abeyance per Williams' instructions until after my death, and will reading. A flash drive labeled for Kirk, the whole story. In a letter, this one handwritten, addressed to Kirk in his grandfather's shaky but determined script. Kirk read it standing in the bank's private viewing room. Kirk, if you're reading this, Phase 1 is complete. They've shown you who they are. Now let me show you how bad it really is. The flash drive contains security footage from my home office over the past 18 months. Yes, I had cameras installed after I started suspecting things. What I found was worse than I imagined. Video of Sherry and Ryan Mendez having sex in my guest room during Christmas dinner while you were helping me in the kitchen. Audio of your mother and Sherry planning your divorce, discussing how to maximize extraction from your brewery. Video of your father in my study, going through my papers, photographing documents, practicing my signature. Audio of Derek discussing how to tank Kirk's brewery by poaching his head brewer and sabotaging his distribution deals. It's all time-stamped, date-stamped, admissible in court. But Kirk, legal revenge is just the beginning. These people don't understand consequences because they've never faced any. Stanford has spent his entire life taking shortcuts, using my money to buy his reputation. Derek is a parasite. Eleanor married into money and forgot she came from less than you have now. Sherry saw a meal ticket and took it. You have the resources now to do more than sue them. You can dismantle them. Carefully, methodically, legally, but completely. The company gives you leverage. The evidence gives you power. Your intelligence gives you the edge. I'm giving you the tools. What you build is up to you. Make me proud. Grandpa. Kirk sat down hard, his legs giving out. He plugged the flash drive into his phone with the adapter from his wallet. The first video made him want to vomit. Sherry and Ryan in the guest room, December 23rd, 2:47 p.m. Kirk had been in the kitchen, making Grandpa Will's favorite potato salad, laughing about brewery stories. The second video was worse. His mother and Sherry at a coffee shop, May 14th. Audio was crystal clear. Eleanor. The key is filing immediately after the inheritance. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, but assets acquired during marriage are community property. If you move fast enough, you can claim half of whatever he gets. Sherry. And the brewery? Eleanor. Hire a business valuator who owes me a favor. We'll inflate the value, force Kirk to buy you out, or liquidate. Either way, you win. There were dozens more files. Hours of evidence. A conspiracy documented in real time. Kirk's hands clenched. The grief he'd felt for Sherry, for his marriage, crystallized into something colder. Harder. He called the one person he trusted. Damien, it's Kirk. I need your help. Something big. Can you meet me? Chapter 5. The Architect. Damien Gaines had been Kirk's best friend since college. A lean, sharp-eyed African-American man who'd gone into corporate law instead of brewing beer, but had always supported Kirk's dreams. He was also, conveniently, one of the best litigation attorneys in Portland. They met at Kirk's brewery after hours. Kirk poured 2 IPAs and laid it all out. The will reading, the letter, the evidence, the betrayal. Damien listened in silence, his expression darkening. When Kirk finished, Damien drained his beer and said, I want to represent you. Pro bono. Damien. Shut up. I met Sherry at your wedding. She hit on me in the coat room. When I turned her down, she said, your loss. I'm going to be rich someday. Damien's jaw clenched. I should have told you. I didn't, because I thought maybe I misread it, and I didn't want to ruin your marriage over paranoia. I've regretted that for 4 years. Kirk felt a surge of gratitude. Okay, so what do? We build a strategy. Multiple fronts. We don't just beat them. We make them wish they'd never heard your name. Damien pulled out a legal pad. First, the divorce. Oregon's no fault, but adultery can affect spousal support. With the evidence you have, Sherry gets nothing. Not a penny. She gets the house, which is underwater and in foreclosure. Beautiful. Damien grinned. She can't afford the payments, can't sell it for profit, can't refinance because she has no income. She's trapped. Second, your father. The mortgage fraud is federal. But here's what's interesting. If the FBI moves on it now, Stanford goes to prison. If we hold it over him as leverage, we can force a different kind of punishment. Kirk leaned forward. What kind? Public humiliation. Professional destruction. Stanford Conley built his reputation on being Portland's real estate kingpin. What if everyone knew he forged his father's signature to steal money? What if every business associate, every social contact, every country club member knew he was a fraud? They'd eat him alive, Kirk said slowly. Exactly. We give him a choice. Resign from every professional position, issue a public apology admitting to ethical lapses, and accept a settlement that strips him of any claim to Conley properties. Or we hand the evidence to the FBI, and he goes to prison. Kirk felt a cold satisfaction. He'll choose humiliation. He can't stand the thought of jail. Right? And here's the beauty of it. We make the evidence public anyway. Anonymous tip to the business press. Let the court of public opinion finish him. What about Derek? Damien's smile turned predatory. Derek's easier. He's been drawing a $180,000 salary from Conley Properties for a consulting position he doesn't actually do. That's your company now. You fire him, cut him off, and watch him implode. No skills, no work ethic, no money. Guys like Derek don't last long in the real world. And Ryan, the affair partner? He's collateral damage. Once Sherry's broke and the divorce is public, Ryan will run. Guys like that don't stick around when the money dries up. Kirk swirled his beer, thinking. The plan was elegant, thorough, but something nagged at him. It's not enough, he said quietly. Damien looked at him. What do you mean? They tried to take everything. My business, my inheritance, my dignity. They laughed at me. My own father called me worthless. Kirk's voice hardened. Legal consequences aren't enough. I want them to feel what I felt in that conference room. Kirk, I want them destroyed, Damien. Completely. I want Stanford to lose everything he values. I want Sherry to regret every lie. I want Derek to understand what it's like to be looked down on. I want my mother to face consequences for 32 years of calculated cruelty. Damien studied his friend. That's a dark road. They started down at first. A long pause. Then Damien nodded slowly. Okay, but we do it smart. Nothing illegal that can blow back on you. We use their own weapons, exposure, social pressure, economic leverage. We make them destroy themselves. How? Damien pulled out his phone, pulling up an encrypted note app. Let me tell you about a little concept called strategic disclosure. We're going to tell the truth, Kirk. All of it. In the most damaging way possible, to the right people, at exactly the right time. And we're going to let Portland's social and business community do the rest. They talked for 4 hours, building a plan. By the time Damien left, Kirk had a roadmap. And for the first time since the will reading, he smiled. Chapter 6. The Opening Moves. Monday morning, Kirk walked into Conley Properties' downtown office building with Damien and a woman named Patrice Tyler, a corporate security specialist Damien had brought in to secure Kirk's new acquisition. The receptionist, a young woman named Jasmine Bowen, looked up in surprise. Kirk? I mean, Mr. Conley? Your father said. My father doesn't work here anymore, Kirk said calmly. I'm the majority owner. Is he in his office? Stanford was, and he was not happy. Kirk walked into the corner office, massive, wood-paneled, overlooking the Willamette River, without knocking. Stanford sat behind a mahogany desk, on the phone, his face purpling when he saw Kirk. I'll call you back, Stanford snapped into the phone. Kirk, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just walk in here. I own 62% of this company, Kirk said. I can do whatever I want. He gestured to Patrice. This is Patrice Tyler. She's conducting a complete audit of company records, finances, personnel, and expenditures. You'll cooperate fully. The hell I will. Damien stepped forward, placing a folder on Stanford's desk. That's a cease and desist order regarding your access to company funds, credit cards, and accounts. It's also a demand for your immediate resignation from all company positions. You have until end of business today. Stanford's hand shook as he opened the folder. You ungrateful little shit. I built this company. No, Kirk said quietly. Grandpa built it. You managed it. And you've been embezzling from it for years. We found 3 shell consulting companies that do no actual work, all receiving monthly payments, all owned by you. That stops today. It wasn't true yet, but Patrice had found preliminary evidence in 15 minutes of looking. Stanford's face confirmed it. If you fight me, Kirk continued, I released the mortgage fraud evidence to the FBI, the Bar Association, and every media outlet in Portland. If you resign quietly, I'll consider keeping it contained. Your choice. Stanford looked at his son with pure hatred. Your grandfather poisoned you against me. No, you did that yourself. By Wednesday, the news had spread through Portland's business community like wildfire. Stanford Conley had been forced out of his own company by his son. The rumors varied: financial mismanagement, family dispute, health issues, but the outcome was consistent. Stanford's professional reputation was crumbling. Kirk implemented Phase 2, strategic disclosure. He invited 6 key figures to private meetings: 3 members of Waverly Country Club's board, 2 major clients of Conley Properties, and 1 business journalist from Portland Business Journal named Clemeny Zhang. To each, he told the same story: his grandfather's will, his father's fraud, the evidence. He played selected audio clips. He showed documentation. He was calm, factual, sorrowful, a son doing his difficult duty. By Friday, Clemeny Zhang published a devastating article. Real estate dynasty built on fraud? Conley Properties faces internal reckoning. The article was careful, well-sourced, and absolutely demolished Stanford's reputation. Within hours, Waverly Country Club suspended his membership pending ethical review. 2 major deals fell through. His phone started ringing with angry former partners. Eleanor called Kirk, hysterical. How could you do this to your father? To this family? You mean how could I refuse to cover up his crimes? Kirk replied, easily. The divorce proceedings started the following Monday. Sherry showed up with an expensive lawyer named Frederick Hammond, clearly paid for by Kirk's parents. Damien destroyed them. He entered the security footage into evidence. He documented the affair in meticulous detail. He showed the planning, the conspiracy, the intent to defraud. Sherry's lawyer tried to argue community property law. Mrs. Conley is entitled to. Mrs. Conley is entitled to whatever the court deems appropriate for an adulterous spouse who conspired with the petitioner's family to commit inheritance fraud, Damien said coldly. My client is willing to offer a settlement. She keeps the Laurelhurst property and all debts associated with it. He keeps everything else, including his business. No spousal support. That's insane. Hammond sputtered. The property alone is worth $4.2 million with $3.8 million in debt, Damien interrupted. Net equity of $400,000, which she'll never see because she can't afford the payments and the foreclosure is already in progress. My client is being generous. She's earned nothing. Sherry was crying. Kirk, please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I love you. Kirk looked at his wife, his ex-wife. Really, the marriage was dead, with complete detachment. You had sex with Ryan Mendez in my grandfather's house while I was cooking Christmas dinner. You planned to destroy my business. You conspired with my family to rob me. He stood. You don't get forgiveness. You get consequences. The judge, a stern woman named Eleanor Jefferson, reviewed the evidence and issued a ruling on the spot. Divorce granted, no spousal support, property division as proposed. Effective immediately. Kirk walked out of the courthouse a free man. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. 3 weeks after the will reading, the Conley family was in free fall. Stanford had been forced to resign from 4 boards, 2 charitable organizations, and his position at Waverly Country Club. Clemeny Zhang's article had been picked up by national business press. Former friends crossed the street to avoid him. Eleanor, whose social standing was built entirely on her husband's reputation, found herself disinvited from every major event in Portland's society calendar. Derek had been cut off from family money, fired from Conley Properties, and evicted from the condo Stanford had been paying for. He'd applied for 12 jobs and been rejected from all of them. Kirk had made sure his reputation as an incompetent nepotism hire preceded him. Sherry was drowning in the Laurelhurst house. The mortgage payments were $18,000 monthly. She tried to sell, but the market was soft and the debt was crushing. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. She'd called Kirk 17 times, begging. He never answered. Ryan Mendez had dumped her the day the divorce was finalized, telling mutual friends, "I thought she was rich. She's not. Why would I stay?" But Kirk wasn't satisfied yet. He called a meeting with Emmanuel Santos, Damien, and Patrice Tyler at the brewery. Status report, Kirk said. Patrice pulled up a tablet. Conley Properties is clean now. I found $2.3 million in fraudulent expenses over the past 5 years. Those shell companies, plus inflated vendor contracts, plus a bunch of business trips that were actually family vacations. I've reported it all to the IRS. Stanford's looking at tax fraud charges on top of everything else. Good. What about Derek's sabotage plans? I tracked down his communications with your head brewer, Moises Phillips. Derek offered him $100,000 to quit and go to a competitor, taking your recipes. Moises reported it to you immediately. He's solid. I've documented everything for a civil lawsuit. Kirk nodded. Moises had been with him from day one, loyal and talented. Derek had badly underestimated people's integrity. And the bigger picture? Damien leaned back. Stanford's professional life is over. He'll never work in Portland real estate again. Eleanor's social standing is destroyed. She's toxic by association. Derek's unemployable. Sherry's broke and facing foreclosure. You've won, Kirk. No, Kirk said quietly. Not yet. Everyone looked at him. They need to understand why they lost. They need to face me. And they need to hear exactly what they did wrong. Kirk's eyes were cold. I want them all together. One more time. I want them to see what they could have had if they'd just been decent people. Emmanuel raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Kirk smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Kirk sent the invitations personally. Handwritten. Formal. You are invited to a dinner at Conley Copper and Grain Brewery, November 15th, 7 p.m. This is not optional. Attendance is required per settlement agreements and ongoing legal proceedings. Business attire. Come alone. Kirk Conley. The date was exactly 2 months after the will reading. Stanford called immediately. What the hell is this? A closing meeting, Kirk said calmly. You'll understand when you get there. Don't be late. He hung up. The evening of November 15th was cold and clear. Kirk had closed the brewery for a private event, sending his staff home with full pay and thanks. He'd spent the afternoon preparing. The dining area was set with one long table, elegantly arranged. Fine china borrowed from a catering company, excellent wine, small plates of the brewery's best food. Soft lighting, classical music. It looked like a celebration. At 6:55 p.m., they arrived. Stanford and Eleanor together, both looking diminished. Stanford in an off-the-rack suit instead of his usual designer pieces. Eleanor without her usual jewelry. Derek alone, sullen, driving a 10-year-old Honda. Sherry last, eyes red from crying, wearing clothes that looked slept in. They sat where Kirk indicated, confused and wary. At 7 p.m. exactly, Kirk entered from the brewery's back office, wearing a simple button-down and jeans. He carried the pocket watch in his hand, now restored and gleaming. Thank you for coming, he said pleasantly. Let's eat first. He served them himself. House-cured salmon, artisan bread, craft beer. The food was exceptional. Kirk had spent years perfecting these recipes. No one touched it. Why are we here, Kirk? Stanford demanded. To close the books, Kirk replied, sitting at the head of the table. To give you all one chance to understand what happened and why. You betrayed your family, Eleanor said coldly. Kirk laughed, a genuine sound. I betrayed you? Let me tell you what betrayal actually looks like. He pulled out a tablet, set it in the center of the table. Sherry, let's start with you. This is security footage from Grandpa Will's house. December 23rd, Christmas dinner. That's you and Ryan Mendez in the guest bedroom at 2:47 p.m. He tapped play. Sherry made a strangled sound, but the video played. Explicit. Undeniable. You had sex with your lover in my grandfather's house while I was cooking dinner. You think that's not betrayal? He switched files. This is you, mother, meeting with Sherry on May 14th, planning my divorce. Discussing how to inflate my brewery's value to force me to liquidate. You think that's not betrayal? Eleanor's face was white. This is you, Dad, in Grandpa's study, photographing financial documents and practicing his signature. June 3rd. You forged his name on a $3.8 million mortgage application 3 weeks later. You think that's not betrayal? Stanford said nothing. And Derek, here's you offering my head brewer $100,000 to sabotage my business and take my recipes to a competitor. August 8th. Betrayal. Kirk stood, walking around the table slowly. You all conspired against me. You planned to take everything I had, my marriage, my business, my inheritance. You laughed at me. You called me worthless. You made me feel like I deserved nothing. He stopped behind his father's chair. But the funny thing is, Grandpa will give you exactly what you deserved. Stanford, you got golf clubs because you spent your whole life pretending to be a player while coasting on his money. Eleanor, you got China you insulted because you've always looked down on anything less than perfect, including your own son. Derek, you got a broken car because you've never built anything functional in your life. And Sherry, you got a house you can't afford because you married for money and learned the hard way that greed has a price. He returned to his seat, poured himself a beer. I got a pocket watch. It's worth $6.8 million. I got stock certificates worth $24 million. I got Conley Properties, which I'm restructuring and rebranding. And I got something none of you will ever understand. I got respect. From my employees, from my friends, from this city's business community. I earned it. Stanford's hands clenched. So what do you want? To gloat? No, Kirk said. I want you to understand cause and effect. You destroyed yourselves. Not me. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. He pulled out 4 envelopes, sliding them across the table. Stanford, that's your final settlement. You resign all claims to Conley Properties. You repay the $2.3 million in fraudulent expenses over 10 years at 0 interest. And you stay away from me forever. In exchange, I don't press charges. The IRS still might, but that's between you and them. Stanford opened the envelope, his face ashen. Eleanor, that's a notice that I'm resigning from the family. I'm removing myself from your will, your trust, any family legal documents. I want nothing from you. You're free to pretend you only have one son. Eleanor's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Derek, that's a cease and desist. You stop contacting my employees, my business partners, or anyone associated with my brewery. You stop using the Conley name professionally. You build your own life, like I did. Or you don't. I don't care. Derek stared at the paper like it was a snake. And Sherry, that's your final divorce decree and a notice of foreclosure on the Laurel Hills property. The bank takes possession in 30 days. You can walk away with whatever equity is left, about $120,000 after fees, or you can keep fighting and lose it all to legal costs. Your choice. Sherry was openly sobbing now. Kirk stood. I'm done with all of you. This is the last time we'll speak. Sign the documents. Leave them on the table, and get out of my brewery. Kirk, Stanford said hoarsely. I'm your father. No, Kirk said coldly. You're the man who told me I was worthless my entire life. There's a difference. He walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and one more thing. Grandpa Will's real legacy wasn't the money or the company. It was the lesson. The world will try to tell you who you are. Family will try to define your worth. But the only opinion that matters is the one you have of yourself. He smiled. And I know exactly what I'm worth now. Do you? He left them sitting there. 4 people who'd built their lives on cruelty and entitlement, now faced with the ruins of their own making. Kirk walked into his brewery's production floor, where the gleaming copper kettles reflected the soft lights. He pulled out the pocket watch, opened it, listened to its perfect mechanical heartbeat. His phone buzzed. Damien, all signatures verified. Documents filed. You're free. Kirk texted back. Good. Tomorrow we start building something better. He poured himself a fresh beer, his own creation, his own work, and drank it slowly, tasting victory. Chapter 9. Epilogue, The Breaking Point. 3 months later, Portland's business community gathered at the Sentinel Hotel for the annual Business Achievement Awards. Kirk attended reluctantly, convinced by Damien that visibility mattered for Conley Properties rebranding. He wore a tailored suit, his first good one, and the pocket watch on a new gold chain. It glinted under the chandelier lights. The awards dinner was tedious until the master of ceremonies reached a particular category, Emerging Business Leader of the Year. This year's recipient demonstrated remarkable business acumen, ethical leadership during family crisis, and successful transformation of a troubled company. Kirk Conley Properties. Kirk stood to genuine applause, walked to the stage, accepted the Crystal Award. He gave a brief speech about integrity, second chances, and building things that last. What he didn't say: Stanford had been charged with tax fraud 3 weeks prior. Eleanor had been quietly dropped from every charitable board she'd held. Derek was working third shift at a warehouse, barely scraping by. Sherry had declared bankruptcy and moved back to her parents' house in Idaho. After the ceremony, Kirk stood on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Portland's glittering skyline. Someone joined him, Moises Phillips, his head brewer, who'd come as Kirk's guest. "Hell of a speech," Moises said, handing Kirk a beer, Conley Copper and Grain's new seasonal, a robust porter. "You really did it, man. Built something from nothing." "Not nothing," Kirk said quietly. "I had Grandpa Will's faith. That counted for everything." "Can I ask you something?" Moises hesitated. "Do you regret it? How hard you came down on them?" Kirk thought about it, sipping his beer. "No. They had every opportunity to be decent people. They chose cruelty. I just held up a mirror." "Fair enough." Moises raised his glass. "To broken watches and new beginnings." Kirk touched his glass to Moises's, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd won. Completely. His family was destroyed, his ex-wife was broke, his company was thriving, his reputation was restored. So why did he still feel empty? The answer came 3 days later. Kirk was at the brewery early, reviewing expansion plans, when the door opened. A woman entered, late 70s, elegant, with kind eyes and Grandpa Will's jawline. "You must be Kirk," she said. "I'm your grandfather's sister. Your great-aunt, Ethel Conley." Kirk stood, stunned. "I didn't know Grandpa had a sister." "He had two. I'm the only one left." Ethel sat down uninvited, studying Kirk with sharp intelligence. "Your grandfather and I weren't close. He thought I sided with your father too often. But he sent me a letter before he died. Told me to check on you after the dust settled." "I'm fine," Kirk said automatically. "Are you?" Ethel's gaze was uncomfortably perceptive. "You destroyed your family. Justified or not, that takes a toll." Kirk's jaw tightened. "They deserved it." "Probably," Ethel agreed. "But revenge is a funny thing, Kirk. You think it'll make you whole, but usually it just leaves you holding a broken piece of what used to be family." "They were never family." "Not really." "No." Ethel pulled out an old photograph, slid it across the table. "That's your grandfather at 25. And that's your father at 10. Look at Stanford's face." Kirk looked. Stanford was smiling, genuinely happy, holding up a fish he'd caught. Grandpa Will's arm was around his shoulders, proud and warm. "What happened?" Kirk asked quietly. "Life. Disappointment. Your grandfather expected Stanford to be like him. Scrappy, self-made, hungry. Stanford wanted to be accepted by the people your grandfather had fought his whole life. The wealthy, the elite. They grew apart. Your grandfather got harder. Stanford got weaker. And by the time you came along, the damage was done. That doesn't excuse what he did to me." "No, it doesn't," Ethel agreed. "But it might explain it. Hurt people, Kirk. Stanford felt inadequate his whole life. He passed that inadequacy to you, because that's all he knew." Kirk's throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know, you can stop now. You've won. The company is yours. Your reputation is rebuilt. Your enemies are defeated. But if you keep feeding the anger, if you keep checking to see how far they've fallen, you'll never be free of them." Ethel stood. "Your grandfather loved you, Kirk. He gave you the tools to build something beautiful. Make sure you actually build it, instead of spending your life on demolition." She left her phone number and walked out. Kirk sat alone, the photograph in his hand, looking at a version of his father he'd never known. Young, happy, hopeful. That evening, Kirk did something he hadn't done since the will reading. He grieved. Not for his family, they'd made their choices, but for the family he'd never had. For the father who might have been proud of him, the mother who might have been kind, the brother who might have been a friend. He cried in his empty brewery, surrounded by the copper kettles and oak barrels that represented everything he'd built alone. And then, when the tears stopped, he pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. First, to Damien. Stop monitoring their finances. Stop the private investigator. We're done. Second, to Emmanuel Santos. Set up a trust fund. $50,000 each for Stanford, Eleanor, and Derek. Managed by you, basic living expenses only. They can refuse it if they want, but it's there if they need it. Third, To Ethel, thank you for the photograph and the reminder. He wasn't forgiving them. He wasn't reconciling. But he was releasing the need to watch them suffer. Kirk walked to the wall where he'd hung Grandpa Will's photograph. A candid shot from Kirk's brewery opening, the old man grinning with a beer in hand. Next to it, he hung the photograph Ethel had given him. 2 generations. 2 different paths. Same family name. Kirk touched the pocket watch, feeling its weight, its perfect mechanism, its history. I'm building something beautiful, Grandpa, he said to the empty room. Something that'll last. I promise. Outside, Portland's November rain started falling, washing the streets clean. Inside, Kirk Conley, owner of a $24 million company, survivor of family betrayal, keeper of his grandfather's legacy, poured himself a beer and got back to work. The broken watch ticked steadily in his pocket, keeping perfect time. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.